hi there. This is David Friedman with my co-host Dave Berkus on TCA Crossroads, where entrepreneurs and investors connect. And in addition, where both of them learn valuable lessons from the content of the podcast we have. How are you, Dave? I haven't seen you in a little while.
Well, it's been a long time, like a couple of weeks. It's
That's
just
correct.
coming to be summer. It's swim time again, which is kind of nice as well. And we're all watching as SpaceX takes off. So lots of things are happening as we talk today.
Well, we have SpaceX. We have the NBA Finals. I'm a Knicks fan, so go Knicks. Hopefully, I don't regret saying that to my San Antonio friends. And we have World Cup starting, which has it'd be very exciting for the next several weeks. So,
and we have a program today that I think everybody will love. And I'm going to let you run it. I'll ask a few questions as we go along. So, David, go ahead and take off.
Well, I'm really pleased that Stender Sweeney and Rick Stalmayer have joined us. Rick is the CEO and founder of MindBody. Stender was our deal lead that brought MindBody to our attention. And this has been one of the most successful startups that TCA has ever invested in. So welcome, Stender. Welcome, Rick. And I want to kick it off with a question to each of you, just to prime the pump. Rick, what problem was MindBody created to solve? And then I'll ask you a question, Stender, on what made this so memorable and how you were so successful. Short answer is better because I want to create this dialogue.
Sure. Well, first of all, Dave, thank you for having me on. And it is always a pleasure and an honor to be in a conversation with Stender. So the problem we were solving were the unique business management requirements of this new kind of fitness, what we ultimately would call mind and body wellness. And it required scheduling, customer account management or CRM, point of sale functionality, things that didn't exist in the existing health club software.
Okay. And Stender, what made this deal so memorable? What got you so excited that you decided to be the deal lead? And what got you so excited to bring so many other people into this deal?
Well, I think the excitement started right at the beginning when I met Rick and his team. It was rather an unusual situation in that Rick had gone to New York to find the funding, and it was through a New York VC group that it came circled back around to us. Do you remember, Rick, Phil Smith saying, oh, let's see, San Luis Obispo, Pasadena, they must be very close to one another, right? Why don't you just pop right over and see the company?
Yes, absolutely. It was like a leading question. Is Pasadena is really close to you, right? San Luis Obispo. And I said, sure. Yeah, that was the only right answer. You have to meet my buddy Stender. And that's how it started.
So I zipped up to San Luis Obispo, and if I remember, Rick, you were in the back office of your brother's plumbing supply.
We were nervous about paying for an entire lease, so we split $1 a square foot place with my brother, who's an electrical contractor.
Electrical. I mean, this was definitely a garage situation, but the vision that Rick had was so different from anything that I'd seen. You remember that we were then, this is the end of 2004. The internet was not yet into most homes. I mean, we were talking about only, say, 25 or 30% of the homes that had internet.
High speed, yeah. Dial-ups most people have, but you could never have done this with a dial-up, yeah.
But what Rick was suggesting here, the service that he was going to be able to provide was so radical, so innovative that you really had to take a leap of faith in order to appreciate what could be done. Now, I'd invested in a bunch of failures by this time. My wife was asking me why in the world we're doing this angel thing. You know, by this time I had eight exits. She said I could buy a horse and do better than that. So the notion that Rick had something that was unusual. I went to Dwayne Peterson. What a guy. Peterson asked me a whole bunch of questions, and it was back and forth. And finally he said, Stender, I think you do have something here. I will come on board. We started off, Rick, you came down to Pasadena. There were 8 guys on my back porch, and we all agreed that we would write a check. And frankly, I have to admit that we rather thought that we would lose it. But what
And
the
you're
hell?
still married. We're just checking now.
Most of the others were going to zero anyway. So
Those are the good old days.
But hopefully you're going to hear more about the excitement that unfolded as Rick was proving that he could change the way that entire business was being made.
We called you the pre-Angels, and we did that in the form of a convertible note that would then convert into a hoped for future angel round. And I think it was about 300 grand total. And, I realized then that the definition of a true angel investor is someone that invests when no rational person would.
Great.
Okay, so Rick, let's take it up from there. So you got the money, you had the idea. Had you already created the minimum viable product, or was this now just the beginning?
We had, and we did it with a really what at the time was starting to feel like sort of an archaic back end Microsoft Access database with a Visual Basic front end. And you know what? There was an important principle that we were applying. We didn't even really know it. Mike, by the way, I want to make it clear. I was a co-founding. And Blake Beltram was an old friend from high school. It was the one that came and showed me his first kind of prototype product, this desktop software back in 1999. That's how far back it went. And so what we did, and this is like an important principle, you have got to find product market fit. Don't get too in love with the technology. Technology underlying it is going to improve and evolve. Right. But figure out, first of all, what is the problem you're solving and how you're going to solve it. So it didn't matter how the backend was built. Techies would give us all kinds of, throw shade at us because we were built on the wrong thing. What mattered is that we figured out the set of features and functionality through trial and error and a lot of customer contact. That became the working prototype for the cloud software that would become, but we couldn't have said that when Stender and I first met. We didn't know that for sure.
So there's a lot to unpack right there, but the big thing is product market fit, teacher, customer, and then how did it begin to take off from there? How did you know that you had something, and how did those people get exposed to it?
Well, we had founded the business. Blake and I had started talking about it in 99 and 2000, and I quit my day job at the end of 2000 to officially launch on January 1st, 2001, the new millennium. We're going to do something new here. So we had already been at it for 3 years before Stender and I met. And those early customers, when we were able to install this on-prem software, link it up through to a web-based scheduling system that was very easy to deploy as a link on people's websites. All that very rudimentary stuff by today's standards. We were able to prove that the business owners, once they got onto our product, they were basically married to us. They were never going to leave not because we were deliberately made it closed. We didn't. It was an open architecture. It was because we were solving fundamental problems for them.
There were 3 good reasons why people absolutely were not going to do this. The first one, of course, was that my customers aren't going to like it. 2 is it's really complicated. I'm not sure I understand it. And third, maybe even most important, is you're telling me that my information is going to reside on your server. Under no circumstances am I giving all my clients are my heart and soul. This is what I live for, and I'm not going to give that to you because this is very dangerous in so many different ways. So those were that was the resistance that he had to get over. And what I would go with Rick out to these to calling these people. Some of them were early adopters and responsive, but there were others who would throw those items back at us every time Rick had a really compelling answer. But the problem is getting people to come around. And I remember, Rick, some of those times when we go see somebody for the second or third time, and they would finally admit that that this was a good idea and they wanted to be on board.
That's right. There were multiple people out there, business owners in this space who sometimes they would classically have a student, in their yoga studio who was a software developer and said, look, I'll build you something. So there were multiple people trying to create their own, the Yoga Works, one of the biggest brands in LA, kind of one of the original yoga studio chains in Santa Monica. They had engaged and spent a lot of money to build their own proprietary system on a SQL Server backend. It was actually better architected on the backend than ours, but in a side-by-side compare, we won, and we actually beat them out of the product they had custom developed. Or I should say, we beat out the product they custom developed to become the platform they scaled on.
But the answer to the question you asked me, David, is no. I had no earthly idea that this was going to become what Rick turned it into. And in fact, I must admit that during those first 2 or 3 years, every visit to San Luis Obispo, and there were a lot of them, every visit up there was an incredible revelation of something new and different that he was developing.
So can you just encapsulate what were the biggest concerns or red flags you saw? One was the adoption of technology. The other one was privacy. What else did you see?
Those weren't my concerns, because I had, by the time we got into somebody's office, I had spent enough time with Rick that I could appreciate his argument that no, those risks are not that serious. But the problem was convincing the studio owner of that issue. Now, I think my biggest challenge was convincing other investors at the beginning that this really would work. You remember that what I said is there were 8 of us who came in at first, and 4 of those 8 were not believers. They just said, "Okay, I'll write a check," just in order to be nice. By the time we had our second round, and that, Rick, was 7 months later. Here's the history. I think I showed you this, David, and you might want to share it, by the way, as a very interesting thing. But the point that I'm making is that 7 or 8 months was the amount of time that it took to convince another 10 people. Then what Rick did, because I went back to the Pasadena Angels and I said, guess what? His valuation is no longer $1.3 million. I'm sorry, you can't see this. His valuation is no longer $1.3 million or 2.9. His valuation is $5.5 million. They said, you're crazy. Why would you even think of investing in a company like this that's totally unproven with a valuation of $5.5 million?
So anyway, so then the second round was led by one of our most impressive customers, a guy by the name of Trevor Tice, who was building out a chain of yoga studios. That's Core Power Yoga. So anybody knows anything about the yoga industry and knows who they are now. Extremely successful. I mean, hundreds of locations. At the time, he had 2 locations in the Denver metro area. And he said to me, I'll never forget, I went out to meet him. He said, Rick, I need you to succeed so I can succeed. Do you have enough money? Well, the answer to that question is no, because anytime you get asked that question by a potential investor, the answer is no. I don't have enough money. If I had more money, we could grow faster and improve the product faster. So with Trevor, we did a follow-on round of $3 million we raised. And that went very fast. The Friends of Trevor, we called that.
By that time, you were looking at a $10 million post.
Yeah.
That answers the question about how you're able to get traction, which is the next biggest thing, not just product market fit, but how people began to notice you.
Actually, there's another traction step that occurred 18 months after that. And that was the day, Rick, that you went to a program in San Jose.
That's right.
There was a program in San Jose, and there were a lot of early stage companies that were presenting there.
And some really big ones. There was this one that was emerging rapidly called Salesforce, and Mark Benioff was on stage. Yeah.
And Mark Benioff was scheduled to come in immediately before Rick. And he gave his little talk for 10 minutes or whatever the allocated time was. No, it was the other way around. He was after you, Rick.
No, he was before me. It was just sheer luck. The room was packed because everybody came to see Mark, and nobody knew who I was. And I had a 5-minute period after that, because they would basically the big headliners, and then they would like salt in some small fry after them, right? And then there'd be another big headliner. And so that was the stroke of good luck.
But here's where the stroke occurred. When Mark took the stage, what he said is, I don't know how I can follow that guy. What he just said was so compelling, so important. And Rick, what happened is you and I walked out of the room onto the hallway, and about a half a dozen VCs followed right after. And it was Catalyst investors, the New York-based Catalyst people, who came up. They hung around you for 30 minutes. I mean, it was just amazing because these programs go in 5 and 10 minute segments, so people are rushing away to go on. There was a crowd of people around Rick that stayed, and of course he came along and he invested $5.6 million at a 20 million pre. That was 18 months later.
And so thank you for correcting that memory. All these years, Stender, I've been saying it the other way around, but I didn't even know that Benioff came on after me and actually complimented. I had no idea, because I walked off the stage and I was just surrounded by all these people, and then we kind of went out into the hallway. I didn't even get to hear what he had to say.
Well, I heard exactly what he said, which was that your story was better than his.
Oh my God.
You
got on the cap table.
You were talking about both you, Stender, and Rick going out to find new investors. And I think that, again, is very different than what I've seen today. How about you, Dave? Do you see the same, or is that really, maybe it's a model everyone should follow for the future?
1 out of 100. It is.
1 out of 100.
It's rare, for sure. So, Rick, help us with the revenue growth year on year.
Well, I used to be able to recite the revenue each year. I mean, but the business was at that stage roughly doubling year over year. And we were going through a business model change from on-prem software where you're collecting the full value of the software up front, and then hoping to get some ongoing support and services revenue as a recurring component, which would always become an argument. They'd be like, well, why should I pay you for tech support? If your software worked perfectly, I wouldn't have to call you. But with software as a service, of course, so we went from selling like a typical installation with 2 monitors on-prem software was about $2,000. This is in 2003, 2004. And then in 2005, rolling out the SaaS solution called MindBody Online, where we were starting at $65 a month. So the revenue we had to go through this, like, this innovator's dilemma of, wow, we have a hit on our hand. You know, we're signing up far more. We went from 50 businesses a month to 120 businesses a month overnight. But the next thought in our minds was, oh shoot, what's going to happen? Look what's going to happen to our revenue. We're going to turn into a cash burner. That's where we had to start understanding the principles of recurring revenue and LTV to CAC and all that.
It is one of the things I've taught over the years. Making that switch, which was typical of people getting into SaaS, just like you're describing it, sometimes takes 3 years to break even on a cash flow basis.
Absolutely. We went from a break even, nicely growing business around the time that Stender and I met to a hot burning, but much faster growing network.
Right.
And we could do the math. And of course, the critical questions, what is the attrition rate? And what happens to the customer relationships as they scale up and getting in? We kind of, like back then, Stender and I and some of our earliest VCs, including Bessemer Venture Partners, really helped us kind of partially invent and come up with the methods of understanding the business and how we were creating value, even though on paper we had never made money at that stage.
I don't want to correct you, but you and I developed the snapshot. We did that. And you remember that what that snapshot did was to demonstrate how in the world you could postpone the break-even point. Rick went, and I'll just jump forward here for a moment to say that Rick went from losing $200,000 or $300,000 a year to losing several millions of dollars a year, and he went public losing money. And the audience came to the table and said, we want this company that can lose all this money, because the rate of recurring revenue growth is so great that we know that eventually, because they're making money on each one, but it's the growth rate that's causing them to lose money. And you remember, Rick, that when you brought Bessemer, Catalyst helped bring Bessemer to the table. Bessemer was really the turning point that brought in all those others, because IVP came along, W Capital Partners came along, Montreux Equity. I mean, all these people arrived because the Catalyst people were your champions, and they bought the story that as long as you were growing and you could prove that profitability was going to come eventually, and that it would be substantial, they were willing to accept it.
Yeah, that's right. We might all remember that during those years, I mean, Amazon hadn't made a profit yet. And there were people that were naysaying Amazon,
for a long
all Jeff Bezos has ever done is burn cash.
By the way, one example of all this, you both, Dave and David, you both know Bill Zimmerman. Sure. Zimmerman was my neighbor, and I forced him into the first round. He was happy when he saw the valuation going up, but he would come over to my house and he'd say, Stender, these people are losing money. And Rick just put out a schedule that he's going to lose more money next year. This is crazy. I can't, what's going on? I said, Bill, you do not need to write another check. Just enjoy what's happening.
What were the other execution issues that you face, Rick? Because now you're growing, you're getting capital, you're getting more investors. There's two aspects to that. Number one, the original investors are looking at dilution, notwithstanding the pie growing. And you're now trying to deal with growth in an uncertain market where you're still losing money, but you're growing rapidly. What were the issues relating to execution that taught you something, or that you invented?
Creating a system that could, originally we built our own servers. We actually had them in the closet because we had a T1 line coming in from a ISP that was next door when Stender first saw it. Shortly after that, we moved into co-located server racks. But the number one issue was reliability. You have a system that is running 24/7, 365. And by the way, we had overseas customers almost immediately, because this is a vertical market. And in vertical markets, everybody talks to everybody. So, we had a guy that knew in Hong Kong who knew the yoga studio owners in Seattle. That's how we got in Hong Kong. And then it was Sydney, Australia. And then it was over the pond in London and Berlin. That happened incredibly early, but it meant the system had to run around the clock. And so, I'm a Navy trained guy. I was a nuclear submarine officer. And I know the way you keep complex systems reliable is that there's a backup for everything. There's a redundant system. If you needed two pumps, on those two of those condensate pumps, you have three of them, 1, 2, and 3, and you alternate between 1 and 2 and 1 and 3 and 2 and 3 in alternate weeks, so that if you're not using your backup, it doesn't exist. That was a Navy principle. There weren't a lot of people in IT thinking that way. So we architected our server structure that had all these layers to it, that could manage the data of all these different businesses independently. And I didn't know IT. What I knew was system design like that, and we would whiteboard it out with the IT engineers. Making that reliable was really hard back in those days. There was no AWS. There was no Azure.
Yeah.
It's funny that that's just 20 years, and yet when you look back and you see how much we worried about things like fencing off your competitor, worried about reliability, worried about, on our side, worried about the profitability of converting to recurring monthly revenue. All of those things, looking back at it, it's amazing that you guys not only survived but grew. But you did, because you had the right idea at the right time.
Well, a lot of good fortune. Meeting Stender was pivotal.
Rick,
because I had done some pitches already, and it was like people were checking their watch. It was it took the right, and the gentleman that introduced us was an old college buddy of Stender's, and Captain Phil Smith. And he's the one that said, you should go talk to my friend in Pasadena. And how we met him was because of a relationship. I mean, it's hard. You never know. You never know what doors will open in surprising ways.
Rick, let me remind you of another crisis that occurred. I think they called it a DDOS or something, whatever it was, where you got attacked. Your website was attacked.
Yeah. By the way, wasn't going to go into it, but there was, it was the wild, wild west in the burgeoning high-speed internet. And so a DDoS, a distributed denial of service attack.
Yes.
And keep in mind, we were storing not only PII, person identifying information, but also credit cards. I mean, ultimately, when we went public, we had 60, 70 million encrypted credit cards being stored on our servers. That nobody does that way anymore either, right? That's something you go hook up a Stripe, or some other similar. But we did it all. We learned the data encryption, the standards necessary, the PCI data security, payment card industry data security standard. Learned all the acronyms, learned all the technology. And to keep that stuff safe and secure was also non-trivial. A DDoS is an attempt to take you down, basically bring you to your knees by overwhelming your web servers. And then while it crashes everything and you're trying to get everything running again, the security layers take a while to come up, and then they try to get in under the security layer and deposit malware. And once they do that, then they're going to hold you hostage and extort money from you. That was happening a lot back then. It was wild, wild west.
And we've all seen movies where you're looking at a war room where there's an army of people sitting in a room looking at hundreds of screens and trying to do this and that, the other thing. I couldn't believe when I went there that day, Rick, to see the chaos in that. Well, it wasn't chaos. It was controlled because the chaos was coming at you from every different direction. What was the name of that man who was your tech guy then? He was just fabulous. That the way he.
Well, you're talking about Chet Brandenburg?
Might have been. But
yeah,
you and he were working together. It reminded me of a well executed football play or some event and it was all spontaneous because chaos was coming.
We can go on and reminisce of all the positives and negatives and the concerns and the good things. But I wanted to give Rick and also Stender an opportunity, provide some advice to the entrepreneur, Rick, and then Stender provide the advice from the investor point of view, and then Dave and I will summarize. Is that okay?
Sure. Number one, customer. It's product market fit. Somebody has to have the tech competence, but the person that the mind or minds that are going to drive the success are the ones that can really get inside the heads of your customers or your end users. That in the end is the only thing that really matters, because you could build a perfectly architected something, but it's not aimed right and you're just wasting your time. And so get to a demonstrable minimum viable product as fast as you can and get in front of customers. And don't let somebody talk you into re-architecting or anything dumb like that until you figured out what customers actually need. Number two, you got to make your decisions with the three to center. Your head, that's all the logical thinking. Your heart, which is about what are your passions, what do you love, what are you curious about, and your gut, that's your intuition. So head, heart, gut. When all three of those things are in alignment, go for it. That's your decision making. If you find yourself trying to talk yourself out of it, it's probably the right thing to do, because what's happening there is your head is going, wait a minute, I can think of 50 reasons why this is a terrible idea, but your heart and your gut already know. Your intuition already knows what you want to do. And the opposite, if you're trying to talk yourself into it, this makes perfect sense. But something is just off. Trust that gut. And the last thing is, I came across Steve Jobs' famous commencement speech, which happened in the middle of all this at Stanford. You guys remember that? Incredible speech. I think I need to watch that once a year just to get recentered. But one of the things he said is you cannot connect the dots looking forward. You're only going to be able to connect the dots in your life looking backward. So you have to trust in something, your intuition, your gut, something that tells you which direction to go. And I think the gut intuition moves like that, the head, heart, gut thinking is really what ultimately, that and a lot of good fortune and a lot of really wonderful people like Stender at the right moment led to the success.
Well said. Stender.
And Stender,
Well,
quick summary of what you think that the investors should know.
Okay, other than the most obvious ones of you must diversify and you must learn to be patient, even though it's unpleasant, is what Dave Berkus said early on in this conversation. That is, when you write the check, you're not done. You're just getting started. And you absolutely must follow the company. That's why Rick and I got into that snapshot thing that we were doing. Remember, Rick, we were doing for the first 3 years, every single month.
Every month.
And when you get that information, you need to act on that information. If it's nothing more than an attaboy or a what the hell are you doing now, it needs to be something that is a proactive involvement. And there's so many times, I have a nice tidy little list of the companies that we've actually saved over the years, because what's going to happen is that entrepreneur, he loves his VCs and they're the guys with the big money, but when the entrepreneur gets into trouble, he's going to turn to his angel investors, because those are the people that knew him and understood what he was actually trying to do when it couldn't be done. And so that's why staying tuned in with the company, staying with them, and even if you have doubts, you need to, once you're committed, you need to continue to try to help make it work.
Good one. Dave, you want to bring us home?
Yeah, this has been excellent. Head, heart, gut, customer first always. There's a lot of lessons here that really make us smile. But it's great to see a tremendously successful business. You guys working together, Stender and Rick, you're kind of like Cameron and Bear or Abbott and Costello. I mean, there are a whole lot of
I don't know about Abbott and Costello, but
that have done so well over the years. David, go ahead and take us out.
Yeah, it's great. The other thing I want to mention, discontinuous innovation will trump anything that's a line extension for the big return. But what I really like, I love the heart, head, gut. But I also like the fact that you, Stender, and you, Rick, worked together to find new investors. You became committed to each other as a team. I don't see that very often, and I think that's a really great lesson. So if you're really energized and believe in it, I think you go after it. And the other thing, Rick, that you pointed out, you had a core yoga as the major customer. That reference cell early on becomes a good stepping stone. But I think this is great. I really appreciate your time. And for TCA Crossroads, this is David Friedman, Dave Berkus, Rick Stalmayer, and Stender Sweeney. Have a great investing life.